The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here and Dan Rylance, and we're very pleased to welcome to the show this evening Tom Grogan and also Lori Carroll. They are both with the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and they're here to talk to us about the Oshkosh-Civility Project, which if you read the Northwestern or listen to the radio, watch any of the school board meetings or government meetings on TV, I'm sure you've heard about it in some form or fashion in recent months. So we're very pleased to welcome them, and we're going to find out tonight just what the Oshkosh-Civility Project is, how it came about, and how you can get involved with not just civility, but the Oshkosh-Civility Project. So anyway, welcome to you both for being here. We appreciate it very, very much. So now, Tom, you kind of headed this up here in the Oshkosh area?
Well, I'm serving essentially as the facilitator for the Oshkosh Civility Project.
Okay.
And I work in the Chancellor's office and work closely with Lori, and we've got both a university civility effort and one in the community. And yeah, we can certainly talk about the history of both of those.
Sure. And Lori, you are a communications professor at the university, and so you're going to talk to us about how we communicate, how we interact in a communicative sense with one another.
That's right, and why we need to even have a conversation about civility.
Sure.
We're all nice people. Why should we have to talk about civility?
Well, we're going to get into that because things have they've really kind of gone downhill and disintegrated in over the years. So, especially in the most recent years, I think. So, well, let's talk about the Civility Project first of all. How did the Oshkosh Civility Project come to be?
Okay.
Let's hear a little history about it, if we
Okay.
could.
Walter Scott, who works with Independence Financial Services in Oshkosh, has a son in Truckee, Tahoe, California. And in the course of visiting that community, he saw references made to the Speak Your Peace campaign in Truckee, Tahoe. He started to find out more about it, what it was, where it came from, what it meant. He found out that it was a focus on civility. He brought that idea back to the community of Oshkosh about a year and a half ago, started to talk with the Community Foundation, with Stu Rickman from the Oshkosh Northwestern, Chancellor Wells, and others, saying maybe we could do something like that in Oshkosh to help strengthen communication and improve civic life. And so from that beginning of Walter Scott's interest, a little core group was formed to actually develop strategies for creating a program, finding out what they did in Truckee, Tahoe, where it came from, and then how it might fit in Oshkosh.
Okay. And so where is the Civility Project at right now in its formation or its history, its evolution, if you will?
Really good question. In the span of, I'd say, less than 4 or 5 months, we now have over 100 people who've specifically signed up to join the project. We know that there will be many more as we reach out into the community. We have a website that provides information about our activities. We've got posters and materials. We're starting to deliver presentations, working closely with the Oshkosh Northwestern, the university, the Chamber of Commerce, the Oshkosh Community Foundation, the school district, city, county, to get the basic civility model out there. And we're exploring ways to reach out to the community to have greater understanding about what the project is, what it isn't, where it came from, and what it might mean. And I think the big point that we need to get out right from the beginning is the concept of civility here doesn't mean that we're trying to prevent disagreement. What we're really trying to do is give people the skills that they need so that they can have intelligent, thoughtful discussions, and that when there are points of disagreement, that the rationale and context is understood so that you're not damaging relationships.
Okay. Now you mentioned what it isn't. And I should say, Tom mentioned that they have a website. We have that address. And throughout the course of our discussion in this segment, we'll be putting that address up so that you can log on and check the website out and sign up to get involved in the project if you'd like. So what isn't it? Let's
It's
cover
not
that.
a campaign of thought control. It's not
Okay.
a campaign of morality. It's not a campaign of setting standards and holding people accountable and creating checklists of appropriate and inappropriate conduct. What it really is giving people the tools of understanding so that they could see how other people might be evaluating their comments.
I'd also just like to add that it isn't shallow. So we're not the politeness police if we're connected to civility, and nor do we think that merely being polite or tolerating one another will help us make any progress towards civil discourse. And civil discourse is the kind of complex idea that we want to move people toward.
Okay.
And how one engages in such dialogue is no simple matter at all. It's not about please and thank you, though that's welcome.
Sure.
But something much more complex and obviously much more challenging.
Well, as I mentioned, and I can't remember if we were talking about this before the camera started rolling or if I mentioned it as part of the intro, but, civility really has gone downhill a lot in recent years. And I think part of that is because of the anonymity of a big part of the internet. But it's also, we just seem to be more tolerant of things as a society. And so is that kind of what is prompting movements such as this, is what we're seeing on the internet and in real life?
Well, I think there's a lot of different motivating factors. Some of it relates to conduct and bullying behavior. Some of it relates to the rhetorical excess of two areas come to mind in my mind as politics and sports, and so I think some of the language and some of the patterns of conduct have deteriorated to a speed that relates to the news cycle and the comprehension cycle of people who are watching the news. So it's one-liners, it's zingers, it's trading insults, and what we're trying to do essentially is raise people's awareness to see that there's more effective ways to communicate where you get to a deeper level of understanding and where you can actually not only change someone's opinion but maybe learn something yourself.
Okay.
Is there any other country that has this sort of thing going on?
Well, I'm aware of efforts specifically in Canada right
Okay.
now where there's a national effort relating to elections for Parliament, and I'm aware of efforts in England
Okay.
as well. But I would suspect that just about every nation state, regardless of region, language, culture, has issues that relate to how people interact with one another, and that there's probably a conservative/traditional view that holds many of the modern things as undesirable. And so then there's this creative tension with the new media and the global communication patterns. So Lori may have a better idea for what the research.
Don't our churches and our schools and our fraternal organizations through the centuries, haven't they been teachers of civility?
Well, certainly it's not that there's never been effort toward civility, and now we have a civility effort, and so the world will magically change. That's not our expectation. In fact, at the university, there are many, many endeavors already in progress before we had a Civility in Everyday Life conference, before this community connection with the civility effort. The very process of education, K-12 and higher education, is related to how to have civil discourse when differences are present, which is almost always. And so, yes, indeed, it's always been going on. So I think that some of the recent incidences on college campuses where hate speech and some of those have come through social media sites, have resulted in tragedies, do get attention. Have such behaviors always been present, and have there been those who have been trying to counter them in schools and in churches and in colleges and in community groups? Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And this is our effort and our time and our place. It may be somewhat different because of our political context and the technology that's
Okay,
involved.
one more devil's advocate question. I read your 9 principles that the school district: pay attention, listen, be inclusive, show respect, don't gossip, and be agreeable. These are things I learned in kindergarten.
Did you
They're-
learn them? Are you able to do them each and every day with any kind of person you meet? I know you, and I think the answer might be yes. But can everyone?
Well, I don't know, but so you're going to take over all of these other institutions then? These seem like pablum to me, the points. They're Boy Scout or Girl Scout stuff. And I look at them, I think, gee, this is really simple.
That's exactly the point.
One of those principles is jumps out to me as paradoxically simple and complex, and that is be inclusive.
Yeah.
And so as we work on our campus at UW-Oshkosh to be inclusive, there is so much positive intention. There are so many efforts toward inclusivity, and yet we still have challenges related to all kinds of identities among students, among staff, among faculty, in which our interaction is affected by those differences. And we can deal politely on a surface level, but if we are to know one another and to benefit from one another's differences, we're going to have to learn how to be in dialogue with each other about those differences, and that's what inclusivity is. And I believe it's getting more and more complex. And what it was in kindergarten and what it is in a college classroom when there are many different identities and there is honor for all of them, and a multicultural curriculum and a world context, a global context that is so full of need. I mean, it isn't simple, and it is.
Can I,
Yeah.
because we're still on these 9
yeah.
principles here, I think, these are very simple, as we've been talking about, but one might confuse people, and that's number 6, be agreeable. Now, some people might say, well, gosh, you can't just be agreeable with everybody because you may not agree with what they say. So explain to folks how they can be agreeable while disagreeing. Because I think that's where maybe some people are going to get hung up.
Well, I think it. Can I take this?
Lori's jumping. She's chomping at the bit for this one.
In the process of dialogue, as we're working to be inclusive, we need to assume difference and honor it, and yet pursue similarity. So the idea in dialogue is so different from debate. So in debate, I'm going to tell you what I believe and why I believe it and why I'm right and why you're wrong, and you'll do the same. Then we'll be more entrenched when we're done than we were when we started. In dialogue, I'm present. I say what I say, but when you talk, I incorporate what you have just said into my thinking and into my next comment. And I think that's the essence of number 6. It doesn't mean that I am agreeing with you. So in every interaction, there's both content and relationship communicated. What you say and how you say it. So how I say it may be the agreeable part, that I honor who you are as another human, another person just as valuable as I am, right? Yet my content may be in disagreement with yours. So I assume difference and I pursue similarity.
Okay. Let me springboard off that for a second. And I'm not wanting to be disagreeable. but something you said kind of made something pop up in my head here. You said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but when we debate, then we become more entrenched in our own beliefs. And, and maybe we're not going to be as agreeable then. So do you think that, are we maybe creating or encouraging more uncivility by having debate teams in schools or having political debates? Because we're never going to get away from those things, you know.
I would want to wholeheartedly disagree with any implication of that from what I said. And so I'm really glad you asked the question, because the critical thinking that is taught through formal debate is a cornerstone of civil discourse in a democratic society.
Okay.
Right? But if we only, you want to talk? Go ahead.
He's had his hand up.
I know, but the debate world needed me to say that, and I wholeheartedly endorse the kind of debating that is about critical thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were wanting to point something
Well, I
out
just
there,
wanted
or-
to
Let's pull it up.
point out we've got these posters, and this is the Speak Your Piece campaign. These will be appearing around town. This has a graphical depiction of the 9 standards. And if you look at the one on the Be Agreeable, what it says is look for opportunities to agree. So even if you're in a hardcore debate, and even if it's a drag down fight, it's always good to find what you can agree on. So that's a good admonition as well. And it says don't contradict just to do so. I think when kids are growing up, they argue just to practice arguing. And then sometimes we adults do that too, because it's fun, you know. But what the framework of civility is saying is be aware of what you're doing and be aware of how it impacts others. And through that process of dialogue and discussion, you can actually have progress. So the objective here, let's agree, that simple standards, it's kindergarten level direction, I suppose. But these are things that are not understood, and the Civility Project will give a common language and a common framework for discussing civility. It's one that will link the kindergarten, elementary school level students with their parents. It will link members of the school board with the population that they serve. And so if the basic concept is if we can give a framework that people can understand, it gives a new way to talk about language and interaction. And that's really the primary goal that we have, is to raise the level of awareness.
Okay.
Could I give you an example from the campus community now? We're doing a project. This is just one of many activities happening on campus that are related, and this is called Diversity Dialogues. And once a week we have a group of students, there's students of color and LGBTQ students, who are meeting to talk about the challenges of teaching and learning from the student perspective, related to having dialogues where difference is present. And I can hear their words echoing in my mind right now, and I wonder if you might have them as guests sometime. But like on this agreeable admonition, they could suggest that we would agree to have the conversation, for example, about racism is important, even if really difficult things are said, and yet to be silent about it and pretend like those issues don't exist and that those differences are not affecting what's happening is not civil.
Okay. All right.
Where do you want people to go with this? Is this just sort of an individual awareness thing, that you bring this to their attention and then we all kind of practice these 9 principles? Or do we sign up for something?
Well,
I don't quite understand where, and what if someone doesn't belongs to this group but doesn't follow them? What if Ben Schneider, number 2, who's hardly the most civil member of the school board, violates all 9 principles? Is someone going to hold him to task that you've failed?
We hold ourselves to task, and we have our peers that we derive our social standing from, and people will resonate to whatever level of interaction they're at. There's nothing about this that's creating a scorecard. There's nothing about playing a game of gotcha. There's nothing about a litmus test about how pure you are. There's nothing about people signing up to agree to be held accountable to that. On the little card that we have, that we're hoping these will appear around the community, this little reminder card where it talks about these standards as aspirations, things that we would aspire to do. And so all of us fail in our goals, more often than not, many times a day. And so all we're trying to do is give a common language, a common basis for discussion, And what people choose to do with that is up to them. But I think that as the effort continues and as people gain a little bit of knowledge and understanding, they'll have a new way to talk about the dynamics of interchange in terms of what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, what's desirable, what's undesirable. And I think that if we can raise that level of understanding, we can actually improve the caliber of discussion. I need to say, though, that Oshkosh is already known for being a very warm, friendly, cheerful, hospitable community. This is not an area of failure or deficiency. This is a real community strength that we have. And so the effort says if we can find a way to even raise that to the next level, we will then have a true distinctiveness that will make us stand out. Right now, the community of Oshkosh, Wisconsin is the leader in the state of Wisconsin, at least in terms of current effort to try and get out there and make a difference in terms of the type and character of public discussion. And that's really something to be proud of. And that's something that everyone could agree with, whether they like the principles or not.
The nice thing about these cards is, it's a business card, so you can put it in your wallet, and so these 9 principles are always right there in front of you as you open your wallet. How can, and you said you were hoping that these will get around town, how can people get their hands on these?
Great question. First of all, we need to thank the Oshkosh Northwestern for covering the printing costs for the posters and the cards. We have a limited supply of them now at the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation. We know that we will be getting more. We're making presentations to community groups right now. These cards will be out in community. There's kind of a little, and so people can contact through the website, send an email, and I will personally follow up with those requests. We're giving presentations. There's kind of a little joke in the community of civility where you'd be able to say, have you been carded recently? And that these little cards in and of themselves will have a currency and relevance within communities because people will be joking about it and then we'll all be laughing about how we fell short or how Lori should have really been carded because of her. And so I think that will actually be a pretty common thing as the message gets out in the community and people start to have some fun with it.
Are you guys kind of presenters? If some group wanted to have to take the pledge and do the cards, they would call you and you'd come and make a presentation?
Not only are we presenters, but you both are presenters as well. People that have the interest and the idea to learn more. We're developing common materials. We've got a group of folks that are delivering presentations right now. We've got workshops that are being talked about, PowerPoint. There's lots of things that need to be done. So they can contact the project through the website, and then I'm very sure that people like Lori, Carroll, and others from the campus will also be joining with us in the presentations. But we do have there are people that are making presentations this week. I've made 2 myself.
And I want to make sure that before this segment ends that we get their website address up on the screen at least a few more times so that people have a chance to jot it down or log on while they're watching the show. Although I don't know that we want to encourage that. We want to finish watching the show, right? Because we got another half hour coming up.
It's number 10. We just added that. Watch Eye and Oshkosh.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're okay.
That was taken too. Someone said that we need a driving one, so that we need drive responsibly. But actually, that's kind of a good question because a real key point I need to make. This campaign originally started in Duluth Superior. The friends in Truckee, Tahoe borrowed the campaign from Duluth Superior. And so right in our own neighborhood, our friends from across the state were the originators of this campaign. The graphics came from them. They've been endorsed by the Oshkosh-Civility Project. But there is discussion. Maybe we need a more Oshkosh-specific campaign. And maybe some of these standards need to be changed a little bit. The referent book from the civility expert, Dr. P.M. Forney, actually has 25 rules of civility, of which the Duluth folks reduced down to 9. In some of the work that Lori's working with, there's other frameworks for discussion as well. And so I'm personally hoping that at some point we have more of a grassroots effort to maybe develop different messages that will all fly under the flag of the Oshkosh Civility Project. Different types of efforts to raise different issues that would relate to community needs.
Okay.
You've been in Duluth Superior and Oshkosh. Any inroads with the legislature or the governor's office in Madison with civility?
Actually, we did garner interest from the system when we had our Civility and Everyday Life conference, and so there were people from all over UW system, which certainly connects to the Board of Regents, and we would expect that there are many who have been educated at UW Oshkosh who are leaders contributing to the current situation in our state and contributing in constructive ways. And that is a hope of all of us in higher education, because there are many efforts, not termed civility efforts, in progress prior to this, and now there's an umbrella term for that, but we have a key initiative of the system and of our campus that is called Inclusive Excellence, and we also have a massive effort related to sustainability, which is not just about the planet but about the people, and all of these efforts that are alive and vibrant in our classrooms and in all kinds of programming on our campus connect to civility, right? And affect, we hope, in multifaceted ways, the conversations that can be had, that can move our state toward the Wisconsin idea.
Let's quickly talk about politics. I know time is running out. There actually was a national campaign, National Civility Project. They pulled the plug on it because only 5 members of Congress agreed to sign up. Before the start of this legislative session and the current blow up of partisan politics, there actually was a civility framework announced in a bipartisan way.
So at the federal level or
at the state level?
At state level.
Look in today's Oshkosh Northwestern for the picture of the lucky card that determined the results of the election. Oshkosh is an absolute model of civility in politics. When you look at even the political undercurrents of the unrest in Madison, there's stories of human drama and interest that relate to bridging the partisan divide with different legislators involved. There's also incidents of significant partisan rhetoric getting carried away. I think that Oshkosh as a community and that the Oshkosh Civility Project as an idea does have the potential to kind of ripple out, radiate perhaps through the Fox Valley, and actually then maybe try and set a higher standard that would impact state government politics and the elections that will be coming up apparently a year from now, next summer, and next fall as well.
Sure. Even this summer.
Even in May or June.
Yeah, this summer. Real quickly now, you went before the school board. They, approved 7-1 or 7-0 rather, to, kind of endorse this project and to support it and help promote it. So what will they be doing to help support and promote the project?
Well, a couple of things. This poster that we talked about earlier is physically present inside the board packet of every meeting that they have. They have the curriculum that was developed in Duluth Superior. It's a K-12 curriculum to see how the civility framework could be taught in the schools.
Okay.
They'll be working on that as well. They are interested in the program outreach efforts that we're making in terms of presentations, programs, materials. I think as we get into the next school year, when some of the younger residents of Oshkosh are getting some exposure to a framework for civility, they'll actually be bringing that message home, and it'll probably create even more interest in terms of what this project is, what it's trying to do, where it came from, and what it means. And certainly the university will also be working as educational partners, not only with the public schools and the Christian and Catholic schools, but also with Fox Valley Tech and others. And actually, as Lori said, throughout the UW system.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're out of time, but thank you both very much for being here. We appreciate it very much. Just sit tight. And speaking of the school district, when we come back after a short break, we're going to be talking about how the governor's proposed state budget will be affecting our local school district. We'll be right back.
Every year, year, the U.S. Department of the Treasury receives about 1.4 million reports of problems with paper checks. Checks can be lost, stolen, or delayed. If you still receive Social Security payments by paper check, Treasury wants you to know about a safer, more convenient way to get your money: the Direct Express Prepaid Debit MasterCard. The Direct Express card is new and is available to anyone receiving Social Security benefits, even if you don't have a bank account. Your monthly benefits will be automatically placed onto your card account each month on the day your money is due. While other debit cards cost money, it is possible to use the Direct Express card for free to make purchases, pay bills, and get cash at thousands of locations nationwide. There are no sign-up or monthly account fees. No more waiting for the mail or worrying about lost or stolen checks. Call 1-877-212-9991 or visit www.usdirectexpress.com.
All right, welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh, and now we're joined by John Nichols with the group known as Citizens for a Stronger Oshkosh. He's going to tell us what that's all about, and also joining us is Holly Rottier. Am I pronouncing it?
Rottier.
Rottier, okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
And you are the Director of Assessment, School Improvement, and Communications with the Oshkosh Area School District.
That's correct.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. There is a connection here between the two of you, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But mainly what this is about is we're going to talk about how the governor's budget is going to impact the school district. And John, let's start with you. Let's talk a little bit about your group. You know, give us a little history or a little background of it and how you're tied up with the school district right now.
Citizens for Strong Oshkosh is an informal group of citizens and community leaders that over the past, I think, 2 to 3 years has come together around a common concern, which is caring a lot about our quality of life in Oshkosh and the public and community infrastructure that supports that. And as a result of that, we've looked into trying to find ways to bring really good, objective, factual information to bear on the issues that affect those kinds of institutions. You know, we did a program not too long ago with the panel with Betty Langwin. She was interim superintendent, city manager, county executive, about the impact of $800 million in federal stimulus funds that were spent in Winnebago County when lots of people were saying they meant nothing. Well, we started to learn along with the community about what they did mean in terms of the types of projects that were able to be done that couldn't be done elsewise. So we look to do those types of things, and that really brings about our connection now with the school district and the city and the county again in terms of trying to coordinate a series of programs with you, and thank you for letting us do that, so that people can understand better from those who know best what the implications of the governor's budget proposal are and will be on the school district, the city, the county, et cetera, because that's going on now. And a common theme of Citizens for Strong Oshkosh is to understand that the state makes decisions very often that many months later affect the decisions that can be made or cannot be made by cities, counties, school districts, and others. So really now is the time for people to pay attention to what is in that state budget proposal with Joint Finance Committee hearings that were held and Joint Finance Committee deliberations as it moves forward, because it will impact and limit many of the decisions the school district and others can make.
Sure. And, you know, in coming weeks we'll have on, you know, people from the city and the county and so forth as well to see how this proposed budget is going to impact them as well. A little bit more about your group. How long has it been in existence, and you know, how can people get involved with it if they want to?
About 2 to 3 years. When we host programs and do things like that, we don't have a website or anything like that. They can. Some of the people that are involved with it are a couple of former mayors, Kathy Pratt and Steve Hentz. Mark Harris is county executive, myself, Tom Willitson from First Presbyterian Church, Ashley Hess from ARC, It's been a cross-section of people that have been meeting in the area. Certainly people could contact me, find me in the phone book, John B. Nichols. But when we host programs, we usually have sign-up sheets that and people can talk to any one of the people I've just mentioned about coming to some of our meetings and participating.
How often do you meet?
Sometimes once every 2 to 3 weeks, and other times about once every month or two during the summer. So we kind of slack off then. But right now it's like I said, it's really been an informal group of people and really focused on trying to bring people like Holly and others to kind of get information out to people from good sources about what kinds of things are getting ready to happen.
Okay. All right. Well, that being said, let's get right to the meat of this.
All right.
Let's turn our attentions and focus to Holly. Now, we read in this morning's paper, and we're taping this on April 21st, the district must cut its operating costs between $4 and $7 million a year for 5 years, starting with the 2012-2013 school year. A newspaper article said those cuts are necessary as a result of falling revenues because of declining enrollments and state funding cuts, as well as increases for things like benefits, utilities, and transportation costs. Now, has that also taken into consideration Governor Walker's proposed budget, or will there be even deeper cuts that may have to come if his budget passes in its current format?
Those projections take into account Governor Walker's budget.
Okay.
So the cumulative effect over 5 years is $21 million, with, like you said, 12-13 being approximately $6 million. Now, Dr. Vigut, our superintendent, is very quick to point out that these numbers are floating. A lot of factors can change them. They are not constant. We can't hang our hat on them, but we know they're in the millions, and we know that by year 5 they're in the multi-millions.
Sure.
So we're planning accordingly for those numbers.
One thing that struck me when I read that, and I was going to ask if those dates, the school year dates were correct, and you just repeated them, so I'm assuming that they are. We're currently in the 2010-11 school year. This takes effect with the 2012-13. What happened to the 2011-2012 school year? Why are we not doing anything there?
We did do
Kinda
something
getting a
there.
jump ahead.
we did do something there. As a matter of fact, if I can back up just a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Our associations met with Dr. Vigut and the entire district administrative team well before Governor Walker's plan was unveiled, because we knew that our budget situation was fairly severe before any of this came down. We knew we had multi-million dollars of cuts to make, and we spoke to the associations about how can we all work on this together. And we talked to them for about an hour, and they asked if they could have some time alone. And historically, it's taken a long time for negotiations to happen. Within 20 minutes, they came and got the members of the district administrative team and said, we are willing to make concessions, and we're ready to agree to a pay freeze. And so they already were going to make concessions, and were ready to move to help the district's plight. So when this Governor Walker's budget was proposed, you may have remembered the headline in the paper that the district had, what they said, rushed to settle the contract. Well, that was done with good intent and good reason, because we knew that the employees would help us to make the concessions to balance the budget for next year, which is exactly what they did, contributing more to their insurance, contributing more to their health, to their retirement, and taking a pay freeze.
Okay.
A true pay freeze, no step movement, no lane movement. And so that's why next year you see we actually have a surplus, a slight surplus of about $384 million. Or, I'm sorry, $384,000.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have that kind of a
Fix
surplus,
everything.
we don't have a problem. We don't need to even talk.
That's right.
Go ahead, Dan.
This is sort of maybe longer term than this, but what I fear in the years ahead is that kids don't want to be teachers anymore. You had a lot of retirements. I just read an article from the Milwaukee paper where, what percent? 27% drop in teacher education programs at UW Milwaukee. I don't think this is not a good place to be a teacher right now. UWO is having a hard time filling positions because they go interview and they say, well, you really think we want to come to Wisconsin right now? Do you are you concerned about that long term? That the budget and all of the political things that's going on are going to discourage people from teaching?
we're concerned about that even in the short term with the quality teachers that we have.
Okay, and I don't know what your mean age is for teachers in the system either, but
When we look at it, we see the problem that you pointed out,
Yeah.
that people don't want to go into teaching
Right.
anymore, and especially don't want to come to Wisconsin because of what they see.
Right.
But we also see that our teachers, because Oshkosh and their financial situation, our financial situation is pretty severe, we have to make cuts before a lot of other districts that are surrounding us do. And so quality teachers, when given the choice, can look elsewhere pretty easily for positions. And a lot of people will say, well, you get 100, 200, 300 applicants for a job. But when we get right down to it and we screen those applicants, there are very few qualified applicants for a position when it opens up. And finding good teachers and retaining the great teachers that we have is going to become increasingly difficult depending on the choices that are made here on how to balance that budget.
so you see that as a problem too.
We do.
Yeah.
And we worry about that problem because right now, Oshkosh has great test scores. We're held accountable to WKCE test, which is the state test, and we are above average in the state in every single area, every single grade level, and we can improve every year, and we want to continue that growth. And there are great teachers and support systems that have helped get those results, and those are in jeopardy.
Morale down?
Morale, our teachers have always tried to stay positive for the students and be there for the students. You saw a lot of districts where they had to close because teachers went to medicine, and Oshkosh was able to stay open, and they really stayed true to the mission of meeting the needs of the students. They're having a hard time, a lot of changes, a lot of impact to the pocketbook because it's not necessarily a pay cut, but some of them are going to have to pay in addition, in excess of $6,000 on their benefits that they're getting for this next year.
The health care and retirement.
And it was done very suddenly, so if people budget long term, that's a fast impact for them. And so they're doing a good job of keeping morale up. The principals and the building leaders are doing a good job of keeping building morale up, and they're doing what's best for kids. When you have children
Sure.
in the buildings, you focus on that and you take the good.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the options for, I guess, closing this gap. And I believe this was in today's Northwestern. And again, we're taping this on the 21st of April. I'm not going to go through each of these, but it involves restructuring teachers' pay schedule, increasing employee health insurance contributions, eliminating automatic pay raises, switching health insurance providers. I thought was an interesting one because that's something that has been talked about for a number of years. And, if that's now an option, I mean, it's kind of always been an option, I guess, since it's been talked about. Do you know why nothing was ever done to act on that in the past?
That was a negotiated item in the past.
Okay.
And now with the change in negotiation structures, we have a little more control over it. Now, one of the things we said at the board meeting about that one last night was people are in a time of uncertainty, and allowing them to keep the same provider provides a little bit of constancy. But at the same time, we want to look at making sure we're getting the biggest bang for our buck in that area. And a lot of insurance carriers are willing to make deals. What we don't want to do is make a fast deal that's only for a year and then find out those rates are going to rise by 12% in the next year. We want to look at something that's more of a long-term projection from whatever insurance carrier. And as a school district, if you switch every year, you quickly become uninsurable.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that those decisions are made with a 3 to 5 year lens, and then we relook at it in 3 to 5 years again.
Well, and if you switch every year, you're probably not really saving money anyway because you've got the uninsurability thing. Plus, if it's like with most insurance companies on an individual basis, there's startup fees involved in that, administrative costs, as they call it. So, you end up throwing good money after bad, really.
Right,
So-
and for this first year, one of the things mentioned last night was that WEA is willing to put a $500,000 voucher in our favor for this first year if we retain their services. So that's a financial benefit, at least for this first year. So we're looking at it.
Sure, sure.
It is a proposed budget, and it hasn't passed yet. But John,
Right.
can you kind of highlight 2 or 3 things that concern you the most that's in that proposed budget that affects education?
Oh, well, if you look at the dimensions of the cuts, when you were talking about the K-12 school cut is $834 million.
Okay.
That's 18% of school aid, cut in school aids, if I'm not mistaken.
And how much would that be per pupil per year? Can you break that down to that?
We can. $518 per pupil loss.
Okay, per school year?
Well, for this first year.
First year,
Yeah,
okay.
because it was a $200 reduction, or a $300 reduction approximately. We were
Okay.
looking at a $200 increase. So it equates to about $518 per pupil.
And here's another piece of that is I happened to look again, looking for that information. And one of the things you hear a lot when you read the blogs and in the comment sections, which lots of friends tell me to stop doing.
You'll be better off, trust me.
Was just cut administration, and get rid of more administrators, and we'll be all right. We won't have to cut education. And interestingly enough, the Oshkosh School District, based upon Wisconsin Taxpayer Alliance figures, and if you know the Taxpayer Alliance, they don't necessarily skew one way or the other.
And a fiscally conservative group, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And what they showed is that Oshkosh, for administrative costs, is $592 per student, about 5.6% of spending. The average in the state's $913 per student, and about 8.1% of spending. And out of 424 districts in the state, Oshkosh ranks 424th.
We're dead last in administrative spending.
So this certainly seems to be a pretty frugal district.
Yeah.
And getting ready to experience. And it's also a district that I think the language the district uses in some of their documents is a high-performing district. And I think the conversation ought to be about, do we want to continue to be a high-performing district, and what does it take to do that, rather than just a conversation about how much can we cut and from where.
Well, and unfortunately, even though you're dead last in that cost that is being expended, a lot of people don't want to hear that.
Right.
They've got an axe to grind with teachers, period. They've got an axe to grind with the Oshkosh Area School District for whatever reason. And I think in many cases they just have an axe to grind with public employees, period. And they don't want to hear this that you're telling us, John. They don't want to hear it. They'd rather that you just be quiet and go away, because they don't want to hear the real numbers.
Well, I think
that you
people
just
who
said.
maybe have an axe to grind don't want to hear it, but there are a lot of people out there in the middle who don't necessarily have axes to grind, but need a basis of good information to think about, what should we think about this, and what should we support or not support relative to the district and whatever. And I think that's really the audience for that type of information.
And I think, more and more people, I think, are hearing the things that you just sort of mentioned with those numbers and so forth. And I think that's one of the reasons that at least one of the 3 referenda that was put forth 2 years ago did pass. I don't know that a referendum would pass now, but I know that that's something that the district is looking at.
I think it depends on how justifiable the public thinks it is, number one, and does the public think the district has done as much as they can do to be efficient in delivering services to kids in schools.
Holly, are you, I know you're aware of the referendum that is probably going to be forthcoming. Are you in a position at all to talk a little bit about that?
I can talk some
Sure.
about it.
Sure.
The one that was proposed last night was actually an operational referendum, and none of these are recommendations for last night. What we really wanted people to understand is that when you're looking at $21 million, there are a limited number of sort of big ticket items that can be addressed. And so we have limited variables from which to choose.
Sure.
And when Bob Tess, who is our business manager, had a great interactive tool that he was using on the board meeting last night. And if you would click a button, it would show you how much you would save on the deficit. So when you clicked a lot of those things without putting in a referendum, the projections were still pretty severe. And the referendum is stated very conservatively, where it would use only what is needed when the district can presumably afford it. So while you look at our greatest need being in 2012-13, that's not where it's proposed, because we can't afford it with the tax levy in that particular year. So it's beyond that we're looking, and it's a small amount, $500,000, and then it goes up incrementally to $5 million per year. It's money. It's a lot of money. It would definitely help the situation, but not without being accompanied by cuts. It's not going to happen in isolation. It's not going to be the magic bullet that fixes everything. Everybody's going to have to give something to make this work.
Well, I know one of the other suggestions, not a suggestion, but one of the other alternatives was to, just make a lot of program cuts. And I'm not, here it is, 3.2 million.
3.25, yeah.
In program cuts. And I know when we've had folks on from the district in the past, and school board candidates, when they were on, they said, because we'd ask them, where would you recommend cutting? And they were very forthright and honest in just saying, look, nothing's off the table. Everything has to be looked at. And that may be the district's idea too, but just offhand, can you think of where some of these cuts might be targeted?
I can tell you exactly where to find the entire list of what might be targeted, because what happened is when we started looking at this budget projection before Governor Walker's plan was unveiled, we sat down with our entire administrative team and said, let's look at your own level. So high school looked at high school, middle school looked at middle school, and so on. And everybody try and find $1.3 million you can cut. And that's where we began. But it wasn't in isolation. We talked about what is the cut, what does that mean for the people, what does that mean for the culture, what does that mean for the organization, what is the impact of that cut? So it's not just done arbitrarily and not just done through a fiscal lens. We came up with them. It was 3 months of work. It was heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching, and some of the programming that's on those lists, we don't want to see any of those cuts happen. None of them are good for kids. And there are 29 pages of them that are on our district website under the district link, and then under Board of Education, and then proposed budget cuts.
Okay.
So anybody who wants to see them can go there and look at the complete list. We've not prioritized anything. We wanted to look at it more as a menu for the board to examine, because these are programs that are important and they will affect education and affect kids. So those decisions can't be made lightly.
What are some of the things that are on there?
We looked at non-core areas, non-core curricular areas. We looked at some extracurricular areas. We looked at programming cuts and support services. We looked at some in teaching efficiencies, where we would actually, that's one of the variables as well, where you would more kids in a class, which means less people to have to teach those classes. So basically those 4 areas.
Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
Another result of this year with the budget and all of that is people really, of all of the public employees that were most disliked, were teachers. We had Representative Spanbauer in here a couple of weeks ago, and he said he had his staff during this 60-hour thing keep track of who called and kept track of the emails. And I think he said on camera 90% of them said get the teachers. And then I think he said later it was really 99%. Why is the public, of all of the public employees in this state, why are teachers so disliked in this state as opposed to any other public employees? What do you have any solutions to deal with that?
I think as an educator my whole life.
You're upset.
Well, not even upset, but I can give you some perspective on that, because when you go to dinner parties with your friends, you hear comments like, gee, must be nice to work from 8 to 3, or must be great to have the summers off, or look at that cushy benefit package. What people don't understand is we have kept salaries lower so that benefits could be where the money was focused. And when the QEO came in and you could only look at 3.8%, a lot of that was focused heavily on the benefits side and not on the salary, so they protected that end. Now all the protection is gone. We can't raise profit margins like the public sector can, like the private sector can. So there's nothing we can do to work harder to get those salaries up. We're just left now with let's slash the benefits that look artificially high and have the lower salaries. And you get your summers off, which in reality, yes, there are 3 months, but you're not getting paid for those 3 months, but you also, a lot of teachers have to take a second job in the summer or tutor or use that for planning. That's when a lot of our professional development happens for teachers, so, and they take classes and they enrich themselves in the profession. So there's work being done. It's just not necessarily with the students in the summer.
Are you getting invited back to some of those dinner parties?
Yes, I still go to my dinner parties,
good.
yes.
Keep going. But it seems to me, you're going to go to referendum. This issue of anti-teachers is a bottom foundation.
Well, whether it's anti-teacher or anti-teachers union, I'm not. I might draw some distinction there.
I would too.
And I mean that'd be something to keep in mind, and then just generally anti-union.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon in this type of an economic downturn. I mean, the reality is, for the past 30 years, wages and salaries of the middle class and working class in America have not gone anywhere. They've declined relative to inflation. So it's somewhat understandable that an attitude about public employees who their jobs haven't been offshored. The really good paying manufacturing jobs that existed in the steel industry that we don't have in America any longer are no longer here. And so the last people standing are sort of public sector employees who have good benefits. And it's unfortunate that we're not really looking at what do we need to do to raise everybody up. rather than really looking at a situation where, well, let's drag everybody down to a level that we're all comfortable with. What we really need is an economy that's really working, and a lot of people paying less lip service about creating good paying jobs and actually doing it.
Let me kind of pick up on something that you said there, John, because you said that there might be a distinction between teachers and the teachers union. I think that probably a large number of our viewers see them as one and the same. You know, I think that they say, well, all teachers belong to the union. They're endorsing certain candidates. They're pushing for certain agendas to get passed and approved. I don't think they're necessarily making that distinction. How would you distinguish the two from each other?
Well, I mean, and the first thing, well, when I was director of the public library, we had a unionized staff. Didn't include our professional librarians, but all of the rest of the staff were unionized. But there had been 2 union votes historically in the library, and there was never more than a 2-vote margin for support of voting in a union, or in one case, attempting to vote it out. So it was a very slim majority of people who favored having a union in the first place. And even of those who did, lots of people just didn't care much about it. I mean, they just didn't pay much attention to it. There were always a core of people who were strong advocates. And I'm not speaking either in favor or against unions. And it's just that not all teachers are necessarily very strong advocates of the union. You know, they're members by virtue of their being teachers, as opposed to those who are, you know, active in the union and active in the bargaining processes. So, but I think from the standpoint of the public, the whole teaching and education profession is just getting blasted
They are.
with a broad brush.
Even at our dinner parties.
But it really goes over entirely to public employees. I mean, the story I tell, I was down in Texas recently for a vacation, and a friend of ours was there who's a retired police officer from Portland, Oregon. And he was also a Marine in Vietnam. And one of the things he talked about to me was how, given the reactions about public employees, not just in Wisconsin, but nationally, that's going on, not only has his PTSD come back, but the way he felt when he returned from Vietnam, which was, don't wear my uniform and don't let anybody know I served in the military, which was the same thing I felt when I came out of the service in 1971, is exactly the way he feels again about having been a public employee. Like, I must have done something wrong by going into public service when I did. And that's really unfortunate, because certainly when I entered public service, and many others did, that's the way we viewed it. We became librarians or teachers or whatever because we cared about that profession and that service, and that's why we did it.
Okay. All right. Well, we're down to like 30 seconds. So where is your group going from here?
Well, what we'll keep doing is looking at trying to get information out so people understand that the budget deliberations are going on now at the state level. And while the conversations at the local level are limited by what may be passed, there's still time to influence what may be passed. Okay. And there are revenue options that can be looked at and ought to be looked at as a part of this. And why we don't see more options rather than just the option of we've got to make all these cuts and that's how we're going to balance the budget. And by the way, we're also giving a bunch of tax breaks to someone else. It's something that really needs to be
With a
examined.
one-party system, this budget probably will be approved earlier than it has in some years
I
when
would
there
suspect
are
so.
2 parties. Yeah.
So pay attention early and
Yes.
soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like now.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank
to
you
both
both.
of
Thank you.
for being
Thanks to
here.
you.
We appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
And that's going to do it for us. We will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.